version, you will have proper timings for Turbo Rapidus card.
I'm not doing Rapidus, so I haven't gotten that far, I guess. But yeah, I've seen some of the things about there's some timing dependencies and issues sometimes with those upgrades, but I haven't had any issue yet.
I wish more people would try the Rapidus so I could get rid of the stock that I have of them.
I was the first. I was first buyer.
I think you may be, and I don't think there's been more than one or two. Right? And what really irritates me is before I got any of his items, I put a poll out on Facebook saying, "What items do you want to see me carry?" And that was one of the most common ones people said. So I kind of feel like I was played with that one. Maybe him trying to get rid of his inventory.
Yeah, but
turns out it was one person hitting that button 57 times.
Exactly.
You know, with Rapidus, it was strange thing because I recently have a meeting in a coffee with Atarians in Warsaw, in Poland, and also we had Candle, Sebastian Candle, on the meeting. So the creator of VBXC and Rapidus and Ultimate 1 megabyte and many of those cards, and he told us that the problem was that one of the first person that installed Rapidus was John Flashjet Cat, right? So John Holiday. And the first implementation, he installed it in Atari 220 Axial. So and it is most problematic computer because Rapidus was developed for Atari XE for those timings in Atari XE. And any other computers could have timing issues. So if you install a static RAM, you will you will have solved that problem. But installing it in a most problematic machine is not the first choice for creators and good promotion of this solution.
I thought it was cool after installing that SRAM, of course, then you don't even have to have any of your original DRAM chips anymore. So I just pulled them out and said, now I can use all those in other machines. So
yep,
it's kind of funny.
Yeah, this was the last little thing that I've been experimenting with, and the Atari 2600 Plus cart. This is a cool device. I mean,
I saw that.
This is really cool. I really like the idea of it. I don't like these little development boards here. Less than a year ago, this little development board was $9. It's $60 now. So unfortunately, this makes this device not very economical anymore because the PCB that I had to build and then the Wi-Fi ESP32 that's on it and that development board. I mean, it's a $100 card, but it's still a really cool little device.
I completely understand. I mean, when you can no longer buy EPROMs, but double EPROMs right now are going for about $450 on Mauser a piece.
Jesus.
A piece.
It's going to make our hobby a little expensive.
Just a bit.
Yeah. Hey, Thomas, I have maybe a really well, I won't say a stupid question, but just I'm getting into, just since I'm just starting off with 1 meg environment and side 3 and everything. What is the best way to use it and the FujiNet at the same time, or is there a smooth way to kind of do that? Because I haven't really. I've been thinking, well, how if I'm using that environment in kind of the 1 meg, the side 3, for example, loader and things like that, can you also just tap into or map to network drives with FujiNet as an SIO at the same time?
Yes, you can.
Okay, I just hadn't really tried it.
This is not ironically, it's one of the reasons I wrote the FNC tools, the FujiNet network command line tools. So on Atari apps, you have FNC tools, ATR. It's a whole bunch of utilities that replicate all the functions, not only all the functions of config in individual tools that you can run, and they do Sparta-DOS command line parameters, etc. There are also a set of N tools in there for working with the N device in there as well. Now, as if that wasn't enough, there's also in that same place, there is a Sparta-DOS X cartridge image that has those tools in the cartridge directory. So you can use those directly from Sparta-DOS X. We had to change the behavior of how FujiNet actually functioned due to how Sparta-DOS probes it for devices and whatnot. So if you want to, for example, if you have a set of disk slots that you have set up in FujiNet and you want to be able to use them directly, one of the tools is called FMAll, which is FujiNet Mount All, and that takes all the disk slots that are currently configured in FujiNet and mounts them and presents them as drives. Other tools, but like I said, it's all there and it's all very much possible. Like I said, Sparta-DOS X and Ultimate 1MB is one of my development environments, so I tried to make a set of tools that would actually make it possible to use it in that.
Yeah, I try to avoid stacking too many things at once when I'm just learning it, because then I start thinking, oh, I wonder if I can use it with the turbo freezer. I wonder if I can use it with, but I
go ahead. If it's another data point, and if we have to take and fix something, cool. And again, and there's not that many people here, but I'll say it anyway. I have limited engineering cycles, but I make infinite cycles to teach. Period. End of story. Anybody who wants to learn how this goofy thing works back behind the covers, I will bend over backwards to transfer that knowledge.
You need to write a manual, Thomas.
Yeah.
Then you teach it once, and the people can relearn it. Hey,
there is a guy who volunteered to be a technical writer who just kind of hopped on, so hopefully that will happen.
Oh, sweet. I mean, your videos have been great, but I don't think they go into enough detail for some of us that are challenged. But hey, let's have Brian share his stuff with us, even though we don't have a lot of people here, and I have a feeling that school starting up may have been part of the reason why no one's showing up to this thing this weekend, because a lot of schools are starting here now and next week and the week after, so people could be moving their kids around, but we are recording it. It is on YouTube, so that way people will be able to come back and take a look at it, and I'd really like to hear what Brian's doing and ask him a couple of questions that I've got, but in general, just kind of hear what he's doing and what it is doing for the community. And I'm going to let Eric lead most of the questions since he's more familiar with it than I am. But I do have a couple when we're done. But anyways, let's hear from Brian and have him share what he's got with us.
Yeah, I would just say I met Brian at Classic Game Fest here in Austin. Rob actually, I see, joined also. Rob and I, Rob worked with me to code a couple of games like Reign of Terror and War Room, and we had a little booth one year just to kind of showing that off and talk to Brian a bit and all the things going on. And I had no idea how much was going on in that arena. I had tried Argon before, I think, at that point, but he kind of turned me on to trying it out more and getting involved in the beta and playing some of that stuff. And the fact that it was kind of adding some 8-bit to it got my interest too. So anyway, we talked quite a bit, and I thought, hey, this is great, because it doesn't seem to me, at least from what I see on Atari Age and some of the other communities, that a lot of people are really talking about Argon yet, and yet, it's right there. So anyway, Brian, I just thought I'd kind of tee it up, and I agree with Gavin. I got some questions too. So
yeah, I mean, I guess I did 8-bit stuff like way in the, I guess, early to mid 80s. So maybe I'm jumping ahead a bit, but for those that haven't checked out Argon, it's a multi-platform gaming service, I guess we will say now. So we've taken emulation, but blended that with, we have Google Drive support for bringing your own games. We have our own database of games. So it's a blend of content that we've licensed and provided, and the ability for you to bring your own. I guess that at the time I met Eric, I guess I was 2019?
That's or 18.
It was pre-COVID.
It might have been 18. Yeah, 18 or 19. Yeah.
You know, at that point, like it was our intention to have 8-bit support, and I think we only just added Atari 8-bit this like first quarter, and that was like a long journey itself. So we're up to about 10 different consoles and home computers. 8-bit was the first one we've done, and it's just been a wild ride / mix of for us to bring in a new system. It needs to have kind of a nice intersection of there being good homebrew content for it, there being licensable original content for it. For a device like the 8-bit, we need firmware. So we were very fortunate that the Altera guy gave us permission to use the Altera OS. Like that's one of the reasons that ended up being the first home computer we did. And then, you know, being able to support all the various chips and whatnot, we've taken from a whole bunch of different places. So for the 8-bit support, it's primarily Atari++. So it's this bizarre combination of Atari++ for the emulation core, but Altera for the firmware. And then we brought in the Pokey support from A7800. So there's a bunch of really interesting technical stuff going on under the hood.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you've got, like you said, licensing for a lot of it. I mean, you know, there's a mix from what I see of homebrew, but also, you know, titles from back in the day that that like you said, it's at least from the library that you have to pick from. But you've done some of the licensing, so that to me was kind of interesting. How has that process been, just in terms of securing that and getting things all? You're doing it in like the legal way, so it's
yeah,
it's kind of interesting.
That's worth pointing out. I mean, we're doing this as we're not charging yet. We're just about to exit beta. We've been in a very long beta period, and that's probably why less people have seen it than I would like. We did some test Google ads last year just to see like, well, what would it cost? And because Google doesn't make that very transparent. You just got to kind of throw some money at it and find out. So we were quite pleased when we saw what the cost per install would be, because we're an app, it works out quite nicely that we don't have to do your traditional Google text search ads. We can do, they have a cost per install model where you only pay when someone installs the app. So we gave that a try and we were very pleased with it, but we figured, okay, we did our experiment. We'll come back to that later once we exit beta. So I guess to go to your original question about the licensing, I mean, I guess I must be some kind of a sicko, because I kind of enjoy tracking down who's got what and meeting them, because I mean, all these people have great stories to tell. I mean, you've had some of them on your show, and I guess you haven't seen the stuff that we've got coming. So we've got about 300 titles server side right now in our library, and they're probably like 90% indie homebrew. But what we have behind the scenes is the stuff I've been working on in terms of the commercial licensing, which that will start showing up in basically between now and the end of the year. We just started doing shows again. I was at Classic Game Fest again this year. I guess it was like they did it last year. I almost went. But I did go this year, got a booth. And then we were just at a Game On Expo in Phoenix. I was like, wow, two really hot places back to back.
Yeah.
It's like discovered the scooter economy in both cities. It was interesting how scooters work differently in each of the different cities. But we're ramping up, licensing more content. Where we're headed is that once we're out there fully, so we're going to do a soft launch in about a month, followed by a more formal launch coming up in the holiday season. And where we're headed is that we will be putting out a commercially licensed title every Friday.
Wow.
So there's a lot of work behind the scenes to get that calendar built up, because we don't want to have, we want to have enough of them that we're not, scrambling. And so we've got about 100 titles in various stages right now.
So if everyone hasn't checked it out at all, or brand new, it's I'll just say the way I look at it and what I thought was cool. It's essentially, I know you didn't use the word emulator, because you're right, it's not exactly an emulator, but it provides emulation services to run several different systems. So on at least I've only been using it on Android. I use Android phone. I'm an Android phone guy anyway, but at least for Android, for me, it's an easy way to just pick up my phone, and if I want to kill some time playing Vectrex for a little while, or NES for a little while, or it's so cool. It's got 2600, 7800 games. Now it's got 8-bit games. Yeah, it's got 5200.
Kevin.
No Android here. I haven't been able to check it out. The website said Windows 11, but I can't find any place for Windows either. So I'm completely running blind on this, which is again kind of why I kind of took the back seat on this, because I have no way of even looking at it, and I think that in itself could be part of a problem with getting more people involved in it. Android only, I think, is going to be a very big limiting factor, personally. I mean, I love Android. It's not that I don't like Android, but I kind of moved away from Android a while ago, because if you wanted to do any kind of Apple development, you had to develop on an Apple, and I could develop Android on my Apple as well. So I hope there are some plans that we're going to get a little bit broader client base of this. Otherwise, like I said, I'm never going to be able to play it. I don't have an Amazon Fire Stick or any other things. So we got any possibilities of getting something on the Apple or PC side?
So yeah, I guess yes to both. They're different answers. I mean, we started out with Android, and I guess I'll step back a moment. We do all of our development on Macs, so it's absolutely, it's not a technical issue at all. We actually have our core compiling on Mac, and when we populate our server-side database with metadata, we actually, if we have not been provided a screenshot, we actually have a Mac command line tool that runs Argonne on the Mac for a few seconds and then collects a screenshot so that we can at least have something to start from. So we've already got it in Xcode. It compiles on a Mac. It runs without user interface, but it runs on a Mac. The biggest challenge on the Apple side is Apple, that it's very difficult to get a game platform into the iOS App Store. I won't say impossible. We've got our thoughts on how we can do it, but it would have less features and functionality on iOS than it would on Android, just because of Apple's App Store rules.
What about Windows? I mean, your website says Windows 11.
So Windows we do already have. So Android was interesting in that it got us a phone, tablet, gets us Android TV. Then it was from there, it was just a minor step over to get Amazon tablet, Amazon TV, and Fire Stick. And we're on the Google Play Store and on the Amazon Store. And then it was just one more step from Amazon support to get Windows 11 support. So there is a way that you can get it, you can load it yourself on Windows 11. What we're waiting for is, as a developer, we cannot make it show up. So I don't know how familiar you guys are with the Windows 11 stuff, but Microsoft and Amazon partnered to make Amazon App Store available on Windows 11. So that's how we're getting our Windows 11 support. And we've been running it that way. I mean, basically since the first even like preview version that was available to the public, it just worked fine because we had already done all the legwork in removing all of our Google dependencies and working on open source Android, which, by the way, I guess that's another way you could run it is on a Pi 4. You've got a Pi 4. So pretty much, you know, we've got a level of support for everything that isn't iOS. And that has more to do with App Store policies than.
Yeah, no, I've run into this one before. I've run into this one before too. Apple does not. There are a few things that Apple doesn't like. One of them is emulators. Another one is basically other platforms, potentially other system platforms. And well, you seem to intersect on both. So
yeah, yeah, and I'll tell you, it's not emulation per se. I mean, I can't speak for Apple, but I think the larger challenge for them is that they want a game anyway. I mean, this gets into whole other meta conversations, but for games, they want it such that it's static, that when they review it, that they've reviewed everything and it won't change after the fact. So in my opinion, it's not the emulation that's the problem. It's the fact that we provide a dynamic server-side library.
Yes,
that makes sense. Apple's very anal about their security, and they like their control. So
and
it's not
whatever if it's music, no problem. You can have a Spotify. If it's video, no problem. You can have a Netflix. You can have a book reader. You can have all these other content types. But for whatever reason, games are in their own separate bucket, and you may not have a reader, what they would call a reader app for content that is game content. Could that change?
What about the possibility of Steam? I mean, because Steam has a mobile client, so I mean that's one way of getting possibly around that.
Yeah, we've internally got some ideas for what we'll do for iOS, but let's just say when you've got that many like roadblocks in front of you, we're like, well, why should we do that one first? Because we could do all the effort we've done only to then someone in Cupertino go, and you've just lost, however many months or years of development effort. So at least now the way we're coming at it from already having done the other ones, and it's an incremental effort to what we're doing. So we've kind of de-risked it a bit. I mean, there's always going to be the risk that they just say no and tough cookies, but at least. So I have a feeling we'll be able to solve it. But it wasn't the one we were going to do first, and we didn't do first.
Well, the cool thing about it is, to me, is like I said, usually if I'm going to play those type of retro games on my phone, it's more of like just kill some time if I'm somewhere. I mean, it's not going to be obviously as the full experience of using the real system if you have it and doing it on a real console. But if you're just wanting to do it easy, you don't want to screw around with having to do a bunch of setup and configurations and then it's all done for you. So that's to me, that's the cool thing about it is you just pick the game and it plays. Versus, if you want to go try to set up an emulator on your device and go figure it all out, how to configure every, there's ways that you can play whatever on your phone if you want to sit down and spend half the day setting it up. But with this thing, you just pick it up and you can go, oh, I'm going to try some television games. I hadn't done that in a long time. And there they are. You just pick them, they work. And the interface is good. I mean, again, it's never going to be as good as having like physical buttons and things to press. I think, Brian, you acknowledge that too, but I know y'all spend a lot of time trying to optimize the best experience possible with, touchscreen, right?
Yeah, I'll say, well, there's a couple of things I say about it. One is we support controllers. So if you want to play with a Bluetooth controller or USB controller, you can do that. You can use a keyboard for that matter. In fact, there's a whole bunch of games where I think I get the best scores and timing using keyboard controls because it's just a bunch of buttons. But then we do spend an awful lot of time on the on-screen stuff. We did a project recently, here I'm looking here. We did a project recently with Microsoft where we adapted our UI to work on their, this is the Microsoft Surface Duo. It's a 2-screen device. And let's see if I can do this one. They support where you can, so you can take an app and you can make it span both screens. So our UI now has been rewritten to adapt to that. Let me play it and she's game. So we went through 3 passes of this UI. And for one example is that when we first did it, we had the joystick and the fire button at the bottom. Like if you're mocking it up in a paint program, you go like, oh yeah, it needs to be at the bottom. And then we started playing it on the device and we're like, well, wait a minute, you want the center of mass to be balanced in your hand. So then as a result of, play testing, then we ended up moving up here because even though it looks a little oddball, it,
right,
the weight cradles, it balances. Because if you have your hands here, you've got the weight of the device putting stress on your fingers and it's very uncomfortable to play. So I guess that's a nerdy way of showing, yeah, we spend a lot of time thinking about stuff like that. We've got haptic feedback. So as you're moving around the D-pad, you're getting tactile feedback as to when you're changing the value going to the game and whatnot. And looping back on the prior question, that's actually somewhat helping us on the iOS side because we've now rewritten all of that in Kotlin and Jetpack Compose. So it's all quite fluid and it's all handled at runtime. And there are emerging now ways to be able to reuse Kotlin on iOS and macOS. So it may be that then we don't have to rewrite the UI. We'll see. We're not there yet. I think you'd had another question in there in the beginning. I guess we talked about the controls, but the 0 config. That was a big one because that was like a very early design goal, was that you should be able to install this and just start playing. And especially for games like Intellivision games and Coleco games where they may or may not be using the numeric keypad. I think some of them you might have to have, or more, not might. There are some games where you better know that the keypad might need to get used. But for the modern indie stuff, most of those games are written to be couch compliant. You can just play them with fire button and D-pad. And so we go to shows and we'll just have like all day long, you've got parent and kid, grandparent and kid, and they just walk right up and they start playing. And so, we'll have folks say, well, I could just go get retro, I'm not sure it's retro arc or retro arch, but I could just get that. I'm like, yeah, you could get that. And as you said, you'll spend half a day setting it up. And would you hand that to your 5-year-old? So that's been a very early design goal vision, is that it should be 0 config, which again plays into the legal side. Like we won't do a console until we've got everything commercially compatible. So either by factoring out the firmware, because there are devices where all they do is they enforce DRM and put up a logo or something, you can just factor that out. Or Atari 8-bit, where we were able to work with Altera to be able to use that. But we've had a lot of folks ask us to do C64, and we'd love to do that. But that's the big holdup, is the firmware.
Is it still really challenging getting licensing for that firmware? I mean, is some of it still even protected anymore?
Well, yes,
it is.
that's a whole conversation to itself. But in the case of
say C64 firmware, who still owns the IP for that?
Tulip BV.
What?
Tulip BV.
Tulip BV.
I mean, Cloanto would holds out as the one.
And well, that's the thing. There are a few intersecting bits. Cloanto owns some bits of it. Tulip owns some more bits of it. And due to some serious screw-ups from the lawyer's side when Commodore divested, there are several companies that claim to have copyright to different sets of ROMs for different Commodore computers, and they've been fighting it out in court for the last 3 fucking decades.
So this Tulip BV you're talking about, is this company in the Netherlands?
Yes.
They're a home improvement company.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dude, like, no. The more you dig into this rabbit hole, the more fucked up it gets. Believe me.
Yeah. So that's the life of getting all the pieces have to come together. So that does make it take a bit longer, but that's what we do. And I guess, for what we're doing, we don't necessarily need the whole, we don't need the whole operating system, right? Like, we were fortunate that we're able to work it out, but another approach is to provide a functional equivalent, which is the approach we took with Intellivision. So one of the big, one of the big guys in the Intellivision scene, Joseph Biziak, he did a functional equivalent for the Intellivision firmware, and it doesn't do everything, but it does enough to run homebrews. And since we provide the games, we can just make sure we only, we're not going to provide a game that doesn't work with his functional equivalent. So an approach for C64 would be to do enough of a functional equivalent to be able to run the games we care about. And I've had some conversations with various C64 developers. And in fact, two of the folks working on Argonne were C64 guys back in the day. I was an 8-bit and then an ST guy back in the day. And, there's a whole lot of games that only use a few routines in the operating system. So, and I guess going on a further tangent, there's a project, Mega 65, and those guys ended up doing a functional equivalent. So that's a whole nother path. Now, whether that's like fiscally smart to spend that much time doing, that's another question, but it's technically possible to take that approach where you provide a functional equivalent.
Interesting.
So I guess at this point, the only two Atari systems we're not doing at the moment would be the ST, which that's a firmware issue. That Atari has the original firmware, and then there's an emulator developer that has a functional equivalent, but it's only available under GPL, which is not commercially compatible. So that's if we figure that out one day, we can do ST. And then the other one is Jaguar, which is that's kind of a shame. I mean, there's some pretty awesome Jaguar games, but it's also like that might not make the most commercial sense to do, just because the original library was fairly small, the indie library is fairly small, and it has a bunch of challenges. So that's like why we haven't gotten around to that first. The first one we did was the Atari Lynx. So that was first, and then Vectrex was second. And I guess going back to, Eric talking about, well, it may not be the same as playing on the original hardware, but you've got it. I guess I'm paraphrasing. I mean, I used to say that about cameras, that people would say, oh, phone cameras are crap. And I go, yeah, but I've got this on me 24/7. I'd rather have a phone picture than no picture. So, similarly with gaming, I mean, I do an awful lot of gaming just like when I'm traveling and whatnot. And, I don't have my hardware is at my, I've got a whole setup in the basement. I've got one in my office, but that's certainly not something I've got with me on the road. And then there's stuff like the Vectrex where, man, the prices of hardware. I mean, you guys were talking about chips getting more expensive, but the hardware has been getting more expensive. I mean, you're lucky to be able to find a Vectrex at a show these days for less than $500.
Wow.
You know, and it was only probably 3 years ago that you probably could have had one for 200 or 250. So, you know, everything has gone up, and there were only so many of them. I mean, you know, people debate about how many Vectrex are out there, but it was, you know, it was measured in hundreds of thousands, not in millions.
Hey, here's one on eBay for $13.39.
What a bargain!
With free shipping. Don't forget that.
One would, oh, well, that, I mean, that was a whole nother one. Like when you're shipping a monitor, you know, I ended up buying the Vectrex that I have. I ended up buying at a show, and I checked it. I hand carried it back on the plane because I didn't want to have it shipped.
Yeah.
And the first ST that I got off eBay, and it was just a miracle that it showed up because it was just like, you know, the monitor and the ST in a box. Like, wow.
With no packing material. Had a few of those.
Yeah, I had a few of those. Then I had an old family friend had sent me his own personal Atari 800, and I said, hey, I'll pay for the shipping. Take it to this local store, and they'll pack it up for you and everything. And it came, and it was the Atari 800 and a 410 in a box. That was it. And it, I don't know through what miracle it actually managed to get to me without being completely destroyed. I think it was because he'd wedged in a bunch. He had a bunch of cartridges and stuff, and they were wedged in the box in such a way that there was basically no way for anything to move. So at least it couldn't get damaged by rattling around during transit. But certainly, I mean, it's just a miracle that it didn't get damaged by, like, you know, the corners of the box.
Those systems, some of those systems are getting so brittle. Some more than others, I guess, depending on what they've been exposed to. But you see a lot of pictures of those 800s now getting shattered.
Yeah, it's really sad. So I try to buy stuff in person when I can now. And I really, on my ST side, I really lucked out. There was a computer repair shop that I guess, you know, I mean, I guess they were trying to wind down. It was about an hour and a half drive from where I live. And I went there and I just bought like all the crap they had. And they had advertised having a 1040 ST, and I get there, it's an STE. I'd never seen one of those in the US. So I felt pretty fortunate to get it, and everything was still in the original plastic wrap. And it was like one of those, I guess that was my lucky find. So I get that, and he's like, you know what? You'd probably like this other stuff I've got. So he brings out, he's got a C128, he had 3 C64s, a Tandy 1000, and then 4 other STs. He's like, just whatever, take the whole lot. I said, okay. Wow. So I've now got a stack of STs, but the STE was flawless because it was still like the box looked like rats had been living on it, but fortunately everything inside was flawless and in the shrink wrap. But the other STs had been must have been at like a local college or something, and they all boot and they're fine, but they have keyboard problems, and I'm not sure.
It's great that there's still stuff out there. Sometimes I give up that those kind of finds aren't out there anymore, but they're still fewer and farther between. But they are out there.
Yeah.
How many of you have Atari ST?
What's that?
How many of you guys have Atari ST?
I do.
I do. I never was really into it the way I was into 8-bit. But you know, I kind of, I don't know, moved on at that point in my life for a while from the Atari. I mean, from computer, I'd say just technology in general, just the timing of where that was in my life, and then kind of got back into it later. So that whole phase, I never really got deep into the 16-bit, but I do have them. They work. They work.
Same here. I've got my 1040 on it, but I never was into it like I was the 8-bit. Never.
Right. It just doesn't have the same pull for me.
I went to the 8-bit spiritual successor. I went to the Amiga.
Yeah.
I have an Amiga 500 too, so.
Yeah. That was a whole weird thing for me, at least. I mean, I know what that is.
It's blurred out most of the time.
It's kind of blurred. What is that?
Turn off your background blurring.
No. This is a graphic card to Atari ST.
Yep.
It's on a VME.
Beamulus.
Yeah, it's Crazy Dust too. Just a moment. Yeah, I will show you.
Ah, Crazy Dots.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's right. So it's waiting
For when you absolutely want to run TOS in 1152 by 900.
Yeah.
I guess for me, I ended up with an ST. I was in music at that time, so the MIDI ports were what roped me in. And I guess the fact that they were pretty cost competitive, but yeah, I mean I don't have the same nostalgia, whatever warm fuzzies about the ST as I do the 8-bit. I'd actually resurrected some of my own old 8-bit games. Maybe some folks that see me posting about that on Atari Age, where I'd written them in the Atari macro assembler. And like I said, when Thomas was talking about bringing up the grid, that reminded me of my sadistic, painful journey of getting the games to reassemble. All I had was hard copies, so I typed it in. But my first pass, I set up a Spartados system with the Atari macro assembler and everything, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work very well.
You can't use AMAC and Spartados as much as you want to without some serious patching. It was really meant to run under DOS 2.0.
Yeah, so like it would work, but it seemed like I could like run it once, and then pretty much memory would be corrupted, and I was ending up with corrupted virtual floppies all the time. So I went through that painful process once, and I guess it was somehow sickly enjoyable to do that, but then once was enough. So after that, I decided to invest in learning CA65, and I've been super happy with that. So now I do all my work with CA65. And
it's amazing. It's amazing what happens when the assembly process is faster than it takes for you to lift your hand off the enter key.
Yeah, it was. I was doing Atari macro assembler, in emulation, and I guess without speeding things up, it was about a 5-minute process to assemble my game. And then versus in CA65, you're like make, return, boop, done. So, and being able to use all the modern tools and everything.
Well, it's even gone in a wonderful direction with how fast the compile times are. The 8-bit workshop guy, I forget his name off the top of my head, but he's built an entire integrated development environment in JavaScript as a web-based front end, so that you can pick a platform, start coding, and as you're coding, it will take and compile as you're coding. Which if you're doing, say, VCS games and you're shaping a kernel, that's just super handy.
Yeah. I've been trying to figure out, I think it's possible to use the symbol files from CA65 with Atari 800 MacX, but I haven't figured it out yet. That would make my debugging life a whole lot easier. But
you can do it. You can do it with Altera, and you can run Altera and Wine.
I guess that's just whatever. Two bridges too far for me. I'm trying to keep it all Mac stuff.
You're on there. Yeah.
I run Linux here, and I run Altera as my Atari 8-bit emulator on Mac, and it has the added advantage that we have the Avery put in a device bridge so that you could write custom devices. Well, along comes Jan Kupka, who basically ported FujiNet to be platform agnostic and bolted it onto a bridge so it could be used from Altera. I'm forever thankful for contributions where people just show up, contribute something, and hey, no thanks, just here.
Yeah, here you go.
Here you go.
Yeah.
Hey, Brian, just
every single person who's done that a hug.
Brian, I was just gonna say, throwing back to some of the nostalgic side of things again, you did, like you said, you did do some games back in the day. You also mentioned that you had, I think, even briefly sold some kind of recording software or something using hand-built hardware that went with it, or I just thought that was interesting.
That was, and I actually ended up using that in one of my games where I put some sampled sounds into the game. Unfortunately, when I resurrected that game, it was just from hard copy, so I'm gonna have to. I just took out the sampled sounds for the moment. But, so that product was called the Vigitizer, and that was hardware plus software. And I keep on being almost ready to post that to Atari Age, the software side of it. And I guess it was, I could look it up. It was either Antic or Analog. There was someone who had posted a circuit in one of those magazines. And so a college buddy of mine and I updated that. I mean, it was all like Radio Shack parts. We were building them ourselves. And I wrote the software again in Atari macro assembler. And so that I just have one bug left to fix. I figured I should fix the last bug before I posted it to Atari Age. But that was actually why I wanted to be able to do source, or at least have symbols to debug with, because I've got a memory corruption problem that I haven't been able to track down. I mean, it only happens if you put in an invalid device. So if you put in a proper file spec, it's all cool. But if you put in a malformed file spec, it should be correctly, rejecting that, but it corrupts memory somehow. So
it's basically an audio digitizer.
Right. So you could record sounds, you could play them back, you could reverse them, you could manipulate them. It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, that was like 1984. So I think there might have been maybe one earlier in 1983, but this was 1984, pretty early on.
You just sold that just directly.
Ziploc bags,
You just post. That's okay. Because I remember Parrot. I remember there was a product called Parrot, I think, that did something similar. And I had that, but I don't remember using it a lot. I remember that it was just the novelty of being able to record, literally 2 or 3 seconds because of the, memory restrictions, but to get some little sound bites and then be able to play them back at the time, that was so cool, right? But other than playing with that for a while and the novelty of it, I never really did a whole lot with it.
Yeah, like I said, I did end up using it in a game. We had a standalone player, so if you recorded sounds, you could distribute them with a standalone player. And it's kind of sad. I'd taken high school physics, and I think at this point I'd taken college physics, and I was messing around with the sound recording, like, oh, what's more valuable? Is it more valuable to have, more bits? Should it be a 1-bit sample, a 2-bit sample, a 4-bit sample, or is it the recording frequency? And of course, if I just open up my stupid physics textbook, I would have had the answer, but I had to run all the different scenarios and figure out which was best.
More bits equals greater signal to noise ratio. More sample rate equals greater frequency bandwidth before you hit the Nyquist.
Exactly. I'm like, well, if I just opened up my silly physics book, I could have saved myself. But it was fun discovering, rediscovering it for myself. And then I guess the other non-game I did was a BBS that was written on the Atari 8-bit. We started out using Deep Blue Sea, which is from the Atari Program Exchange.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's Jack Palovich's compiler.
Jack Palovich. And you know what? Jack will come back in, because one of the projects I'm working on right now is I took the source code to Dandy, and I'm one bug away from having it resurrected.
And please do that. I'm cheering you on there. Yes.
Okay.
Please.
I posted a tweet. I don't know. This is these are the sorts of things I do when I'm flying to retro expos. I'll get BB Edit and Mac Terminal and be working on these things just as, I guess that's my hobby. But my goal is to take Dandy and get it couch compliant so that you can play it.
That would be super awesome.
So the first thing I did was I've just got it compiling at all. and it was in Cineassembler, and Cineassembler had some interesting quirks that I guess now if I were to do another Cineassembler to CA65 conversion, it would go much faster. But yeah, and you know, Jack did this for his college thesis, so it's for the day, it's pretty good. It's all quite modular.
It was the whole thing was actually the part that we saw, the part that got released was the single player version, which was basically the first part of his thesis, and then he had built it out actually where they had he had one machine in the middle, an HP 9000 machine in the middle, doing network out to 4 Atari systems, each playing in the same, doing multiplayer dungeon in a single, in the single universe. So, yeah, wonder where that code went.
It was up on GitHub. So.
Okay.
So I converted the manual. So I've got a nice PDF version of the manual with modern screenshots in it, and Jack gave me permission to post that on Atari. So that's another whatever side project, but that'll be something that shows up in Argonne once I've got it couch compliant. Because it's not so much the start select option as it uses the keyboard for the smart bomb and the potions. So I can play it in Argonne right now, but you're pretty much, you're going to be lucky to get to level 2 without ever using a health potion. So we have a couple of ways we can handle that. We actually, our database, we can specify custom mappings. Like, I don't know, Eric, if you'd actually seen this yet, but we added paddle support for Reign of Terror.
Oh no, I didn't notice that yet.
And
definitely have to check it out.
That ends up being a slider. I guess the other wacko thing that we did here. So I'm sure you guys know Tom Hudson.
Right.
Of course.
So we took Planetary Defense, which previously had been adapted to work with KoalaPad, and we got it to work with Samsung and Microsoft Smart Pens. So let me bring that up. So
Planetary Defense is really fun to play on Argonne, by the way. It's one of my favorite ones.
Here we go. So Planetary Defense. There we go. Okay, so
that's cool.
Then we went one step further, and so we can take the same technique and adapt it to Atari 5200 games, since they have an XY game controller. Originally, what I was going to do was I was going to take the Planetary Defense source code and give it the dandy treatment and get it switched over to CA65. But he already had it assembling with Addison, the one that's a cross assembler that supports Mac 65 format. Yeah. So I ended up not doing that because originally my thought was to make an Atari 5200 version of Planetary Defense. And then we ended up, because of this project we did with Microsoft, we ended up going the other way. We made it work without making any changes to the source code by pretending to be a KoalaPad. But we can also pretend to be a light gun, and we can pretend to be an XY controller. So we're actually, I'm looking for games that could take advantage of this. I haven't posted anything yet. But we can.
How do I select? I'm looking at it right now because I didn't know that you had. I know you said y'all were working on paddle support, but how do I go into options? I don't see an option to pick anything other than joystick.
Let me see.
Maybe I don't have the latest.
Yeah,
versions.
it might be like in my version.
That would be really cool because there are definitely some games that it would open up for possibilities to play it on Like you said, if it's a slider, that would make sense.
Yeah, let me.
Yeah, the only thing I'm seeing is you can choose left-handed or right-handed joystick, and
Well, so and maybe that's why we didn't put it out. I guess we would want it such that we could make your game default to paddle, because it defaults to joystick. And we've messed around a bit with that. We've added the ability to like hot patch games. So there was a game where we did that for a similar reason, where we were just like whacking on the memory location that they used to decide whether it was a joystick or something else.
Yeah, I believe it does default to paddle. And so you have to hit option to choose joystick. But right now I don't know how to make it work, so to speak, in paddle mode.
Oops, I just brought up a Vectrex game. I guess, I mean, one other thing it's worth pointing out is we take advantage of being an emulator, and we do wacky stuff, like we added color to Vectrex. So we're doing algorithmic color. And then to loop back to Dandy, I have my own vertical blank music routine. I guess everyone uses RMT now, but I've got the one that I did in the 80s. And because we can just throw another Pokey chip on there, one thing I was thinking of doing with Dandy was adding a 4-channel background music soundtrack, because then it would not interfere at all with the existing sound code, because we could just make it be on a second Pokey.
Yeah, the Vectrex games are really fun to play on here too.
You know what? I think we've got, all right. I think I'll have to fix the database, because I'm doing Warlords, which I know we had adapted Warlords for paddle. Must be a database mismatch. Because we keep one copy of the database for our internal builds, and then we have to keep a separate database for the external builds, since we're messing with stuff. Oh, there we go. So this is Atari 5200 Warlords with an analog stick. So we ended up, which I don't know. I mean, if you the way you tell the difference is if it's a digital stick, we highlight the segment to show it's a digital stick, and if it's an analog stick, you can move it around.
Okay, but is it actually playing the game? Like the game itself is treating it as a paddle? Or is it treating it still as a joystick input?
Well, this is Atari 5200.
Right.
So yeah, no, that's already assuming that it's an analog stick.
Okay.
Although that gets into other stuff. The games themselves can try and outsmart things, and I think we do have an issue where there's one game where it is assuming that it should be digital when it shouldn't, and I don't know that we figured out how to trick the game into, it has its own detection routine.
Because if I bring up Reign of Terror right now, it's doing what you said, where it looks like it's doing analog stick, like it has the circle in the middle.
So you'll have to set the game then to be in paddle mode.
Right. Let me try it again. Yeah, it's in paddle mode, but the problem is, like I'm pushing the button and it's not starting. It should start when you press fire if you have a paddle plugged in. It's like it still thinks it's a joystick, because if I move the stick to the left, it starts, because that's the same as pressing
the paddle
joystick.
Yeah. Could be a bug.
because you're right. It is the graphic interface is showing it like an analog, the round, the circle in the middle, not the. Real-time debugging.
Yeah. And there we go. So we got it. Yeah, you're right. There's something going on here. It's a bug.
There we go.
Good job, Aaron.
You're providing valuable feedback.
Right.
Bug report.
All right. I have no idea where we had last been. You could pop the stack a few times.
So where are you going from here, Brian? What do you think is kind of next pursuit?
We're just at this tail end of the beta. We're going to start doing the subscriptions soon. And then the period between that and the holiday season, we'll be preparing the commercial titles ahead of the game a week model. So I guess our engineering time between now and then is mostly going to be on stuff in support of that. One interesting thing that we've done with Argonne in support of that is we have turned it into a game engine. So we can take a game. So I guess I can't show it. So we can take a game and just make it a standalone Android app.
Oh, I see.
So we have we've been doing that with some rights holders where we're trading the wrap for the right to have the game in our premium section. So that's been pretty fun. So this then lets you take an existing ROM and then publish it on Google Play and
just as a standalone, like if you just wanted to play fill in the blank, but it would be using that same interface, but it would just
right.
Oh, I
so
see.
we now have a tool where we can. I mean, it's not quite turnkey. I guess it takes us about an hour, but we can take a game and they give us the artwork and the icon and whatnot, and we run it through our tool and it outputs a standalone app. So that's that's where we're going to be busy. That and all the the licensing and whatnot between now and the end of the year.
Do you generally find that for the like homebrew, like when you and I talked, and my attitude was like, sure, and I know Rob won't mind, putting Reign of Terror, War Room, because we just did it as a hobby, obviously, and
right.
to us, it's like the more people that see it, whether it's Argonne, whether it's wherever it can be, played, the better. But is that generally what you're finding with like homebrew develops, or more current? That it's more of a hobby, and or
well, they're I guess there's at a high level they probably fall into three buckets. So there are folks that they're doing it because they love it and they just want to they want to share it,
right?
And those are the games that end up in our free tier, because kind of our model is, okay, you provide it to us for free, then we make it such that anyone who downloads the app can play it for free. Then you have like maybe like I don't know, we never want to say up or whatever, but the next bucket, there are folks that do homebrew games and they'll sell them on itch, for example, a couple of $1 download on itch. And then that often will go hand in hand with folks that will produce a full boxed version. So I guess in the Atari world, the equivalent to that would be like that you see folks doing a box product with Atari Age.
Right.
And then you have the full-on, full-blown, more the classic IP where it was commercially produced and sold back in the day. So I guess the answer is yes. All those things exist, and they're like all, everyone has different things that they're excited about or motivated by. And it is cool, like especially for stuff like Vectrex, like that is so hard to share with someone. Like you could spend, you know, as much as you'd spend on an Atari game, you could spend a year working on a game.
Yeah.
And, you know, to only be able to share it with people that have the original hardware, on the one hand, that's kind of special because you're sharing something with your community. But on the other hand, it makes it kind of hard to show it to, you know, your cousin or your coworker. So part of this, I think, is cool, that just to be able to get this to a wider audience. And I personally get a lot of joy out of watching kids play these games.
Yep.
And the fact that the parents can be sharing it with the kids. I mean, for the games we have, you know, maybe the parent hasn't seen it, but you know, they'll know a 2600 game from a NES game or whatnot, and they'll all be having fun. And that's, I don't know, that to me, that's like that's the essence of this. It's the fun, and a good game. I mean, there are 8-bit games that are as fun today, to me at least, as they were back in the day. I mean, there are games that were not that great and didn't stand the test of time. But there's a guy that does a YouTube channel called Crazy 80s Games, and he pretty much I think he's only ever done Atari 8-bit games, but he picks all the bizarre ones, like, you know, Necromancer and Quasimodo. He has a lot of Synapse games on his show. And it's just interesting to me how many of those games were just totally off the charts, like weird.
I agree. Yeah, Necromancer is a perfect example.
I love that
Such
game.
a great
I
game.
still love
Such
that
a
game.
great game.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Alley Cat. Yeah, that's
Cat,
another
yeah.
such a classic, but it's kind of weird when you think about it. Just the different things it includes. You know, it's so diverse in that game. But it's a great
all
game.
of Bill Williams' games are a tad bit abstract. I mean, go all the way up to Bart versus the Space Mutants on the NES. I mean, kind of the same goofy thing. What's going on here? Yes.
Yeah. There's a game that a guy did for Atari Lynx called Growing Ties. And the premise of the game is that you're in a men's shop and different men come in of different heights, and you must match the tie to the customer. And you have this device going back and forth at the top of the screen. You press one button to grow a tie and another button to cut it, and then it drops on the customer. And if it's the perfect size, you get 10 points, and the customer smiles and walks away. And I have no idea what's going on there, but when we go to trade shows, and I mean, often kids will say, like, what should I play? And I'll steer them to ones that I think are they're most likely to like. But if I just, like, if I'm not paying attention to the machines, for whatever reason, the 8 to 12-year-old boys, they organically end up playing Growing Ties. And I have no idea why that is, but they just find themselves drawn to Growing Ties. So you know, you earlier said, oh, you know, you didn't really talk about emulation, and I'd say, yeah, that's kind of on purpose, because we don't want this to be like, oh, is that a Lynx game versus is that a NES game? We want it to be, is that Growing Ties versus Flea versus, you know, whatever. Like, is it fun? Do you like it? And the other interesting thing I find with kids, because they don't know about the different systems and whatnot, it's interesting to me that they will often perceive the Vectrex as being newer than any of the other 8-bit systems, even though it's, you know, for the most part, it's the other way around. And I think it's just because it's like, it's an aesthetic that they haven't seen. So they're just like, whatever, it's lines. That's cool, lines. And then, you know, you show them, you know, an 8-bit game, and they're like, oh, that's blocky. So that's all they know. It's blocky versus it's.
Well, it's funny. I've got 13 full-size arcade cabinets in the garage, and I've got neighborhood kids probably in the 8 to 14-year range that just love these old games. I mean, I've got Defender and Pac-Man and Miss Pac-Man, and I asked him, I said, would you rather be home playing Xbox or PS5 or something? Oh, no, these are way better. So I love seeing the nostalgia value, and the kids, younger kids, are actually enjoying these older games as well.
And the added bonus of literally being able to take and just start the game versus having to wait 45 minutes to 2 hours for a system upgrade, that's a big plus too.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's what I hate about my Xbox.
And so many of the, even new releases now on Steam are trying to go back and have that 8-bit look and feel intentionally, the pixelated look and everything. My son pulled me into a game called Enter the Gungeon, and it's a great game, but it's clearly trying to look like an, maybe NES era game, even though obviously it's doing things that an NES could never do in terms of just, the speed and what's going on with the background and things, but it still looks very pixelated and 8-bit style. So it's kind of interesting that is aesthetic is very appealing. And going back to Vectrex, I think it's because it's got a futuristic aesthetic to it. You know what I'm saying? Even though it's black and white, the lines are very sharp. It's kind of one of those things where when even in a movie or something, someone tries to make something look like it's in the future, but it's almost very rudimentary at the same time. I think that's the Vectrex appeal. It's so slick and modern looking, and yet so sparse.
And you combine that again, this is why one of the reasons I just love modern homebrew is that, of course, you don't give a crap about how much memory you're taking up. You're the more the merrier these days, right? So
right.
These modern NES games, they pretty much standardized on this one mapper where it's 512K. So that's your baseline. Whereas you're looking at your original, say Atari 2600 games, 2 and 4K, and they were doing all these crazy gyrations. It wasn't the maximum amount of addressable RAM that was limiting them. It was cost reasons. And now you just throw all that out the window and you're like, hey,
right.
I'm going to have dual pokey and I'm going to have bank switching and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And you can now go crazy, but still stay within something that could at least theoretically run on the original hardware, but you're not, you don't have those same constraints. So yeah, it's a combination of things. Like you say, you've got the aesthetic, but then you've also got the fact that you can now be doing your development on a laptop and not taking 5 minutes per spin.
Wait 20 minutes for an EEPROM to erase. Burn the EEPROM.
Oh geez, yeah. And then Vectrex was kind of fun for us because we behind the scenes we're actually making a list of vectors. So when we render them at the Android level, we're drawing the lines, and we have options to have a fake phosphor bloom and the option.
Yay, shaders.
No, we haven't done any shaders. One reason is that we, because we're doing it as a general purpose thing, we get people running it on really low end hardware. And in fact, that was something we'd spent almost the last month doing, was we had to tune our code to be able to run on
random eBay Chinese tablet number 4678.
Yeah, there was a tablet that came, not a tablet so much. There's a handheld gaming device called the Ain Odin, and it runs Android, but it just came out. But basically, it's using the same chip that you might have found on a Nexus 5 from 5 to 7 years ago. So we had to do a bit of performance tuning to get that all to work. And it was the same, this is part of our answer for iOS folks. This is a $25 Amazon tablet. And, going back to the kids playing, that's one of the reasons we ended up doing an Amazon version, is because even families that are iOS families, the kids end up having these. So,
yeah.
Basically, the 2019 versions, these $25 tablets, we were just at the edge of not working. So first, the engineer rewrote the video code and got a little bit of extra performance out of it, and that still wasn't enough. and then rewrote the audio code, and then that finally got it over the hump, so that then we were now able to work on these $25 devices. So.
Yeah, Rob had to go, but he was he said he's an Apple guy, so he was wondering if it would work on his old Amazon Fire tablet. He said he knows he has one of those somewhere.
How old it is. So basically, you want to have like, I guess basically if you're like a quad core at 1.8 gigahertz or better, it's probably going to be okay.
What's that?
But we've seen some devices that are more like, dual core. We're like, what? Like who even makes a dual core device anymore?
Yeah.
And like on the Pi side, we're fine on a Pi 4. Maybe now we'd run on a 3. I know before we did the optimization, the 3 would hiccup now and then. So
it's finding a Pi right now that's the problem.
That's the bigger problem. Yeah, when we initially did the Pi version as like a standalone build in like a kiosk mode, and we just didn't get that much interest. So now we just tell people there's a guy that took Android TV and ported it to the Pi 4. Cool. So now we just tell people, hey, if you want to run it on a Pi, just here's the link to go put Android TV on your make an SD card that has Android TV on it, and then just treat it like an Android TV, because it was an awful lot of work for us to do a separate SD image for not enough people using it.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. So you could run Argonne through Android TV then.
Correct.
Okay.
So yeah, so we basically support all the form factors. We support a phone, a tablet, a smart TV, and also like Chromebook or laptop. So Chromebook you would just get through the Google Play Store, and then a traditional laptop you would do through Windows 11, which, like I said, we're at some point it'll show up for anyone to install. But if someone was so inclined to put it on Windows 11, we could send you some links to instructions on how to do it. It's not turnkey at the moment. We have to wait until Amazon, whatever, sets some flag that says it can show up on Windows 11. But it works. If you sideload it, it works.
Gosh, I am so glad I parachuted off of Windows 10.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting. So Google has talked about doing support for Windows 10, and it just, I don't know, they've been talking about it. It's been talked about for about the last year, and it hasn't happened yet. So at least, what we can say is it does work on Windows 11. It would be nice if we could do Windows 10. But, I don't know if
Hey, I'm actually going to need to drop here pretty quick. Yeah. I have an appointment at 12:30, but
thank you so much for stopping by. I've known about Argonne for a long time, and now I'm actually going to take and spend some time with it, especially now that I know that I can put the damn thing on my Shield TV in the living room. So
yeah. So we do all of our Android TV development on the Shield. That's our development.
Yeah. Now I used to maintain a little installation on my Shield TV of RetroArch, and keeping all of that running can be an interesting experience. So yeah, this might be an interesting alternative.
And that was one of the drivers for us to add Google Drive support, because it can be such a pain to get your files onto the device. So you just so you make a folder on Google Drive called Argonne, and then you just go into Argonne on the TV and turn on Drive, and it just pulls from your Drive folder.
Fantastic.
Okay, well, I guess I'm gonna have to get my Raspberry Pi working to play this thing. So I'm willing to go the extra mile to do it.
Okay.
Get a $25 Android pad.
Yeah, I mean, this is their HD10 model. I think this is like the $60 tablet. This is a pretty good one. And then they've got a sale on the Fire Stick 4K Max right now, where that's $40. So I don't know. I mean, there's a bunch of options in like the $50 give or take range. And I hope that one day we can do something with iOS, but
fine. I'll go to Amazon and have another package sent to my house tomorrow. Not like that never happens.
Just add it on to your existing pending order that you already have going on.
Amazon shows up at least once or twice a day here, so.
And then for controller, we just, because we're leveraging off Android, you can use anything Android supports. So to work with a PlayStation controller, Xbox controller, pretty much, anything modern.
So I'm looking at this Fire 7 tablet. That would be fine for running your.
Get the 2022 version. This one I just showed you is the 2019 version.
Yeah, it's 2022 release.
But yeah, the 2019 version we now got it to work, but it was right on the edge. So it's worth it to spend whatever, I think it's like $10 more to get the 2022 version.
Well, this is $44, so I don't know if I can afford that right now.
If you go the extra $10 and get the bigger one.
Oh, the Fire 8 or HD 8? There's an HD 8 and an
I mean, the bigger
10.
thing, I think you'd stepped away. I mean, the bigger thing is like the SoC that's being used, and like if at a 4-core 1.8 gigahertz and up, I don't think we've seen anything have a problem. And then like below 1.8, then it starts turning into, it depends. Like, did they cheap out on whatever cache or something else? But that's.
Well, there's a 2 gigahertz quad core.
That should be fine.
I could have it same day for $49.
There you go.
I get sick of these meetings because I always spend money after these meetings.
Yep.
If you had ordered it at the beginning, you'd probably have it delivered by now.
Probably.
Yeah, I know. Dive bomb by drone.
And I can hook my Xbox controller up to this thing, huh? I never even thought of that.
I did. I was using mine with the PlayStation controller for a while, and that was pretty cool. I hadn't done that in a while.
That's a whole That's a whole nother religious one, because we've got systems we support that were two or more button, and right. You've got the whole, is it AB versus BA?
Right.
Going on.
Well, this is a business expense, so I guess I could write it up, right?
There you go. All right. Well, I guess Eric's got to take off.
Yeah, I do. I need to run. But thanks for joining, Brian. I appreciate catching up with you again. Hopefully, so you were at Classic Game Fest this year? You were there?
Yeah. But we didn't have the best booth location. I'll leave it at that. We
must not have. I thought I made my rounds to see everything there. But
so there was like a row of booths that were facing a wall. And I know when I go to a convention, like when you get to that, sometimes you just like look down the aisle and go, like if it doesn't have booths on both sides of you, a lot of people will skip it. And so it was a row of booths that the booths were facing the wall. So I think
I'm still surprised because I know what you mean. I mean, there's definitely the prime real estate, and then there's kind of the But I usually make a point to try to skim everywhere just to make sure there's nothing. I'm surprised I didn't. I'm sorry I missed you. I was there. I was just there on Saturday.
This was my only bring back, because I got the vinyl of. So
I didn't get vinyl, but I bought the Atari version, and it was funny. And of course, Dave was there, so he did his little signature on it for me. But that's funny. I did not do the vinyl version, but that was pretty interesting take, right? That you can load it off vinyl, right?
I figured if I was going to bother to get it, I should get the vinyl, so I did. And I showed him Petsky Robots running in Argonne, but the 8-bit version is so keyboard dependent that it's not really playable. But. That's
great. Well, hey, I really do need to run. Sorry, okay. But I'll catch up with you soon. And
right. I'll see if I can fix Reign of Terror.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, Gavin.
Hey guys. Thank you all for coming.
Thomas.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Brian. And now I'm going to go play with my Fire HD and load up your application and start playing some of these games. So I appreciate it.
All right. Bye.
Have a good one, you guys. Thank you very much.